Hello, my name is David. I'm an environment artist, and here we are today in Kingdom Come Deliverance II. Gonna have something slightly different today, in that gonna do some mesh analysis. Gonna look at the geometry basically. I found a tool that's very useful and something I've been looking forward to using for a fair bit actually. Done a fair bit of research in order to get some wireframes going. Not as easy as you might think, or at least I didn't find it that easy. But yeah, so it should be quite interesting. So before we begin, again, I'd like to thank channel members. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. And it's really helpful going forward. So yeah, that's cool. And as people join, I will add to this list up here. And just be aware, if you do join, my schedule is such that I'm usually recording a week to 2 weeks sort of ahead of time. So say if you joined today, then it would maybe be a week or possibly 2 weeks before your name would find its way into the credits. So that's that. Right, so let's get on. This guy I noticed here, he was stood right there playing a blooming flute in my ear when I was doing my introduction, wasn't I? And now he's just sat down here and he was waving to catch my attention. So, old matey, enjoy your drink. I can't stop because we've got some polygons to look at. So, have a good day, old chappy. Musician, of course. So, I've chosen this bit. I know, I'm in Kuttenberg in the game, you know, my personal playing, but I've come back to Troskowitz because I looked at this exact spot sort of late last year, and we looked at the mesh, and at that point I didn't know how to access any wireframes or anything like that, so I thought this was the perfect spot. And we'll look at some other bits as well, not just this. So let's just come through this lovely little gate. I love this excellent little gate, and I don't know whether this is just coincidence there, but there's a rock there, isn't there, that's almost propping this gate open. A couple of rocks there, isn't it? Probably coincidence, but you know, that's the sort of thing you put there, isn't it, to prop it open. So here we go, all nice rocks. So what I'm using is a little utility. Well, it's quite popular, called ReShade. And people, if you don't know, it's basically an injector. So it kind of injects data in between the game doing all its stuff, and before it gets to the sort of lighting passes and detail passes like bump maps, parallax shaders. So it's before those processes in the stack, before any post-processing sort of stuff, and it injects into that and does stuff. People predominantly use it for beautifying the image in various ways, and there's loads of presets you can do to make your game look fancier or nicer, or as whatever you want. It's all down to your personal preference. But let me bring up my old ReShade menu here. Let's get the old mouse. Ignore the red there. It's sometimes presets fail for whatever reason. It's very much up to the whims of each engine, what's working and what's not. I've tested it's worked on every game I've tried it with so far to varying degrees, and depending on the engine and how they're processing the data in the stack before it gets actually displayed to the screen, there can be differences and varying levels of artifacting, whatever. But we're not using it to prettify anything. We're using it to look at stuff, right? So let's just look back down there. Well, let me show you. We've got mesh edges. Now, yes, the veg often obfuscates a lot here. I wish I could turn the veg off completely. I can't. It's just how it is, isn't it? But that's not vital to our purposes, because what we're looking at is the roads, because that's what I looked at before, and other bits of incidental geometry. And this is very useful for separating out what is actually mesh and what is a shader or material effect like parallax, normal maps, stuff like that. So it's invaluable. And already you can see here, you know, geometry rocks, actual geometries. Next to it, that rock is in the shader, that's in the material. And that is really getting boosted by the parallax shader. And when I turn it off, you're hard pressed to tell the difference, aren't you, between, I mean, I call them POMs, parallax occlusion maps. That's what we called them at Rockstar, and that's what I always call them. But, you know, you might call them parallax shaders, all the same. And that's a real rock. And, you know, can we, tell you what, let us photo mode it. Photo mode, very, very, very useful here. So let's go down. So when you zoom into this level, you can see that that's a POM, because the way to tell is look at that slight stretching you get on the more vertical edges of this rock. That's the telltale with POMs usually. And it just has that slight stretching as it goes up. And if you're sort of moving around, you can kind of see some. Look at that there. You can see how the different UV levels are scrolling, can't you? You can see the mud on top of stuff underneath. All of that lot there. Check that out. So it becomes very obvious when you're down at this level. You can see the rocks. You know, it's kind of breaking down when you get this low. And it's never meant to be viewed this low, of course. You know, so there you go. And then you can see the rocks on top. And you can actually tell here, this sort of browny mud that's predominantly there, that is your actual base layer. And you can see that the UVs for the stuff underneath it are kind of offset down. That's how parallax shaders are working. You know, it's multiple UV sets, and it actually kind of scrolls them in a parallax way, you know, so the underneath layer moves at a different rate than the top layer. So, you know, that's how it fakes this sort of thing. And it's really good, isn't it? I mean, you know, when you get at normal height for the player, it works brilliantly. It's, you know, look at all that stuff there. When you go down here, you see it all. You know, the illusion breaks, doesn't it? But up at player level, it's brilliant. Let's come out of... yeah. Yes, Henry. I'm glad you think so, Henry. He's been listening, hasn't he? He's a good lad, Henry, isn't he? He's a diligent fellow, and he listens. I bet he was a good boy when he was a kid. You know, I bet he was at the forge. I bet he was a great help to his dad. But so back to the viewing tool. So that's mesh edges. Mesh edges. And look, you know, where we were just looking at, that's the mesh density. And great, isn't it? What a technology all that stuff is. It gives you so much with so little, doesn't it? And let's just say at this point, right, this is inferred geometry. Okay, we're not looking at the actual mesh that the developers have exported and compiled with. You know, this is purely it's a post-process thing, really. So what ReShade is doing is it's taking the image that's going to go to the screen, but before any lighting, and it's looking at a totally 2D image. It has no awareness whatsoever of vertices or anything like that, or mesh or edges, faces. It just has no clue. What this is looking at is depth into the scene. So it hooks into the depth buffer. So the depth buffer is the entire screen rendered. Let me show you it actually. Let me show you it with the wonderful display depth, and we will just pop it on to the depth buffer. That's your depth buffer there. So black is closest, white is furthest away. It's the distance of any given pixel to the camera. And that's all it needs to display this mesh. I mean, I'll show you this. This is useful, this view, but for my purposes right now, this is more useful. So that's all it does. It looks at the distance, and it can infer seams and joins in the image, which really, for our purposes, translate to triangles, polygons here, all this lot here. Some interesting arrangements here, but you know, it's probably not like that in the mesh. You won't ever be getting a polygon that shape in Engine. You know, everything gets rendered down to triangles at the end of the day. And so, you know, this vertex here could be joined to there, and then that could be joined there, and that could be joined there to create sets of triangles, which is all the computer sees at the end of the day. You know, that's your base unit, your triangle, and defined by 3 vertices, of course. So, you know, it's not 100% exactly what is in the mesh that the developers have made, but it's almost 100% match for looking at the geometry. It's nearly bang on and absolutely perfect for what I wanted to do, because you wouldn't believe the hassle that I've had trying to get this mode. You know, I searched all sorts of utilities, and the wireframe mode has not been exposed in the console, in the CryEngine console for this game. You know, it seems nearly all developers strip those sort of things out when they compile it for release, because it takes up extra space on disk. And so, you know, they'll strip out everything that they can. And that goes for Unreal games as well. You know, I know there's lots of commands for wireframe and all that sort of stuff in every engine. And yeah, in nearly all cases, they're stripped out. And, you know, I've not found a single game yet that has actually got them exposed. Maybe some indie games might do. We don't know. But yeah, so ReShade is absolutely spot on for my purposes here. And I'm really excited because, you know, I spent a lot of time, I was giving up. But it's brilliant. So, you know, let me just show you here, right? We've got generally all the terrain on this hillside will be much the same as this, possibly even less dense than this. But it's just that it's so hard for us to tell, isn't it? It's very, very difficult. I mean, look, there's a reasonably large polygon there. Who knows how big it stretches over here? It's almost impossible to tell with the veg, and I've not been able to turn the veg off as yet. Maybe someone knows. Do you know? But that would be super handy. I would love to be able to turn off all the veg. It's great. So all this is doing it, yeah, this is finding the edges of mesh. And so, you know, the veg has a lot of edges, doesn't it? And so it just comes up mostly green and yellow, doesn't it? So this is where it can be useful to activate display depth. I can have them both on, but display depth is another kind of one. It kind of just lets you see more interesting things in the mesh. Different, you can get a different view. I mean, I know it's in normal map colors, a 3-color kind of thing, depending on its facial orientation. But just ignore the colors; it doesn't matter at all. So let's do that there, and we can bring in the underlying texture to this. So let's just have a look at it in this mode, because it's very useful, I think. So I looked at this last time, didn't I? And we were looking at polygon density. I'm going to stick with this view predominantly, because I think this gives us the clearest view of the geometry. We could go with display depth, which is useful in its own way for different things. So, you know, we'll flick between and see. But, you know, this is much more viewable, isn't it? So I was looking at these, right, and speculating, and, you know, sort of, I was saying that they'll be putting track templates down, which are pre-made sections of a nice road that someone's made. And then they'll be strung along, probably strung along, splines for the route. And indeed, this bears out my suspicions here. Because look, we've got general terrain, which is still very, very useful. You know, the material that they're using has obviously got different UV layers, and different things can get painted on it. And here we've got one, and you know, with more vertices, you've just got tighter control of those different UV layers and what you're painting on them. You know, so let's just disregard that for now. And I was speculating that they'll be using decals on top of the underlying geometry. And I mean, they are. It's just that in this CryEngine, decals can go as a separate UV layer on the same mesh, so you don't need extra mesh. Like for instance, on GTA 5 and RDR2, we made decals as separate pieces of mesh, so that you would see another piece of mesh on here, and we would offset it 1 centimeter above the ground, and it would have transparent edges, and so you could you know, have whatever you wanted on that, usually tire tracks and stuff. So, you know, it's stuff like these little bit of decals here, these directional tire tracks. And just in the CryEngine, you know, they're just on a different UV layer, that's all. And so, you know, I think you can go up to like 8 UV layers in the CryEngine, but hardly anyone ever does that because it's just, it wouldn't be very optimal. So 4 layers is your usual sort of thing. And one of those layers will have your sort of AO and stuff on it. And that leaves you with, you know, like at least 3 layers to play around with. So one of them will be the main underlying sort of earthy texture, whatever that is. I mean, it could be this one here, or it could be just this sort of generic mud underneath. And then you've got 2 more layers. So, you know, directional tracks will be on one of those layers. And then probably things like this sort of more pebbly, gritty sort of surface there will be on another one. But with mesh edges, we can see that it's all one mesh. You know, we've just different stuff painted into it, as far as we can tell anyway. But look at the density here. You know, you've got all sorts of cuts supporting the vertex painting that's going on. And look at this one here. As it's going over there, you know, you can see the edge there following the tracks. You can see it roughly following the direction of those cart ruts. And look here, you know, you've got supporting edges following these directional lines going down, all down here. And this is interesting, isn't it, where you can see where there's some slight mesh slip-ups going on here, and stuff isn't quite sort of, well, it's not really been stitched up properly. So you've got stuff sticking up, like all here. And one of the other things, this is where our display depth preset comes in handy. I've lost my mouse. Come here, mouse. There you go. Off with that and on with the display depth. So our depth buffer here, right? So we've got the textures shining through underneath it, but let's turn that off because it's a bit clearer when you see gaps like this here. So that's just not stitching stuff up correctly. But this is the main culprit, because this caught my eye in the first video I did on it. It's a dead giveaway that these are templates, and indeed they are. You know, if we check that out, it's just, as far as I could see, that's a gap in the mesh. I mean, you could speculate that it might be a texture atlas and just a bit of rounding and inaccuracy at the edges of the UVs. It looks to me like mesh, especially as we're looking at the depth buffer here. So we're looking at the distance of a pixel to the view, i.e. us. And there's a clear difference in distance here. So that strongly suggests that that's actually a geometry gap. And if you look, the more you look, the more you see this. Because look, here we are back on sort of more low-res terrain, back onto the template there. And look, looky here. There it is again. And looky here. There it is again. And looky here. There it is again. It's everywhere. And I'm really surprised actually, because I mean, look at it. It just keeps going on and on, doesn't it? It's on and on and on. I don't know what's going on. I mean, you know, I love this game and I'm always singing its praises. But, you know, these things are interesting and they tell us a lot. And it's surprising. That's really bad practice. And I don't know how that got through to the final game. Because, you know, someone should be picking that up. And if you've done that and you're like, you know, job done, okay, I'm done, it's up for review, let's submit it. That shouldn't be happening. You know, because it's quite literally happened all over, wherever that same template is used. See, we're off template now. You can see the mesh there. So let's go back to, let's pop the old mesh edges on. So we're back to sort of more generic, less detailed terrain here. And it's solely relying on vert painting to get these different sort of things, all this different detail. Looks like the preset is breaking down a bit in these sections here, because I'll be very surprised if that was one polygon. I mean, it can't be because of its shape. I mean, that would make a massive n-gon, a many-sided polygon, and it's just, that doesn't happen. You'll end up with all sorts of unpredictable triangulations with that sort of stuff. So, you know, let's not, you know, blame that sort of stuff on the developers, because yeah, that's clearly a display issue there, and not quite sure why it does that, but you know, let's just reshade. Pop it on here. Does this give us any more inkling? I mean, it does, doesn't it? Look, you can see it's harder to see, but it does show you these edges here like that, and you know, that's telling you more about the underlying geometry in those cases. So let's just pop that off there and run it. But it's really informative, isn't it? It gives you, it shows you what you can do, and shows you how much work materials are doing, doesn't it? Here, we pop on mesh edges again. Well, let's just go to a bit more of a realistic arrangement. You know, there's quite low density and a lot of high detail, and it's all materials. And this is how modern games work nowadays. That, you know, we just do nearly all the detail with materials. The technology for materials has come along tremendously, and you know, this is what's given us all the good stuff. And yeah, and it's kind of ironic because at the same time, like, polygons are really cheap nowadays. You know, with modern GPUs, polygons are just, it almost doesn't matter the density of your mesh, you know, up to a point, of course, but it almost doesn't matter. It's materials that your bigger budget cost rather than mesh. So you see here, we're back from generic terrain here to template section here, and it's kind of oddly kind of joined. Like, for instance, on GTA 5, you know, this would be stitched in sort of nice and neatly, whereas this looks almost like it's just sat in to the terrain almost, you know, because you've got this sort of odd little join here. You know, we can't really tell 100%. You'd never know until you actually properly look at stuff in engine. But you know, you can see it there. It's just all kind of plopped on there, really, you know. But again, yeah, there's the join again, isn't it? And it's all over the show, all over the show. Really surprising bug that, and you know, that shows you what I mean when I say, like, if you've got an error in a template that you're using everywhere and you don't fix it, then that error is all over the show. And it could be that there's a slight offset in the pivot, so when it gets lofted along a spline, what should be matching up precisely is just off, and it could be a transform issue. So unfortunate, isn't it? Unfortunate. But here we are, looking at all this stuff. This is interesting, isn't it? Should we bust out the old photo mode? Let's go down a bit lower and see how close we can get. See how close we can get there. That actually, pretty sure that is a decal with an image, and this mesh edge just pick up the edges between full opacity and transparency. So what looks like a load of mesh, I don't think that is, actually, looking at it. Don't think it is. Let's have a look on display depth. Yeah, I guess full opacity on top of a material underneath it, the transparency, you know, it reads straight through the transparency to the surface below, so it reads as an actual height difference in the depth, and so it ends up looking like individual mesh, but I'm pretty sure that's not. That's just a decal. You can see, you know, these are actual mesh, these rocks here. Love this mode. It's brilliant, isn't it? It's great seeing the world in a different view. Oh, we'll have a look at the quarry, actually. Let's have a quick look up at the quarry.
That's a good one.
It is, isn't it, Henry? It's a good one. It's a great quarry. So, I think we'll probably want a bit of light on the case. So, we're running out. We've not even got horsey, have we? So, it's fine, isn't it? Having a nice walk. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to make it morning again. So, see you in the morning. Okay. Here we go. Got some nice lights here. Yeah, let's check out this, because this is a great looking quarry, isn't it? And I think display depth is going to come into its own here, actually, looking at all this sort of stuff. So let's hide that. And there we go. Lots of geometry. But it's really useful to see the shapes, isn't it? And, you know, you can see how they've created this, you know, how the topology is lying, where the density is. So if we unhide, maybe mesh edges, let's have a look. Or let's try it with the actual textures on. That's probably quite informative for us as well, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. And, you know, again, all that great stuff on the ground. Hardly any geometry, really. Just the basic sort of shape to support the sort of inclines. And all the other stuff just sort of sitting around. And, you know, this rock, really nice rock, but really quite basic, isn't it? Really, there's not really much going on. It's the material doing it all, you know, softening those hard, sharp edges. Yeah. And this gives you a good appreciation of, you know, how many separate assets there are sitting in the scene. I'll check that out up there. You know, nice big broad faces up here. This sort of rock, you know, you don't need that much on these broad faces. It's just stuff that defines the big shapes. And then you let the material do all the rest of the work. Yeah, cool. Oh, and yeah, there we go. You see the little shapes on that there as well? Yeah. Floating stuff. Never noticed that before. Yeah. But it's nice, isn't it? I imagine if, you know, if you want to start making some rock assets, this sort of view is very valuable for you. You know, if you're interested in game development and, you know, you wanted to get into developing this stuff, especially environment art, yeah, you know, really useful for you to look at the topology and, you know, what are the professionals doing. And, you know, a lot of these may be modeled at a higher resolution and then they'll decimate them down, they'll reduce them. You know, it's especially if you're using ZBrush or something like that, sculpting software, then you'll be sculpting at much higher resolutions and then it will get reduced to an acceptable level for in-game. And yeah, it's really surprising what you can get away with these days. You know, the materials are just so good. You know, look. And you know, if we didn't have any smoothing of normals between faces, then you know you'd get that look. And it's nice to see a lot of games that play up to that, don't they? They play into this sort of topology. I mean, if you look at something like Doesnt, that's really basically just using this with diffuse textures and some really nice lumen lighting with Unreal. You know, it can be a really sort of you know nice style to work with that plays to you know efficiency. So quite cool to look at the buildings as well, isn't it? Let's not leave those sort of things out. You know, you can see that it's just a massive polygon, isn't it? Let's pop mesh edges on. It's going to be useful. Do we want to turn display? Yeah, quite like that actually. Yeah, let's check it out. But yeah, you know, especially things that are going to be silhouetted, like these corners. You know, put detail on them, because that's what's going to get highlighted against stuff that's behind it. You know, especially like roof lines, things like that. You know, anywhere where you're going to get a silhouette, and corners of buildings are great examples of this. You know, that's where you're going to put your detail, and in between, you get away with as little as possible. Now, that sort of stuff, you know, you can't get around that thing there. But is that actually mesh? Is it actually mesh? It's difficult to see. I think that's probably a texture with alpha on it. you know, photo mode again, so we can get a bit closer to that, can't we? So, yeah, let's put them both on, then we'll see. So we can't get as close as I would like. I wish this would clip through, actually. Yeah, I think that's just a texture with alpha, and so, you know, it's reading the alpha as obviously transparent. So hardly any geometry there either, really, other than oh look, yeah, there we go. You can see these little pieces. There's 4 polygons on each one, and they're curving outwards a little bit to give, you know, a bit of support to what is just basically a few large polys with an alpha texture on it there. So let's come out of that. Yeah, you can see there, that's quite a good illustration of it there, isn't it? You can see that, yeah, they're all separate bits of mesh coming out. Check out all that. That's pretty cool, isn't it, as well? We get up there. That's really nicely done, isn't it? There's plenty of detail on those edges. We go. Oh, I can't quite get high enough up there. Oh, there we go. It's a bit better. Yeah, there we go. So again, alpha textures on top of lower res geometry for all that. Don't know why I'm moving my head as if I could look around the corner. And then going, oh. All I'm doing is just moving my head out of shot. I'm like, oh, Henry, there you go. He's looking up there with great interest, isn't he? Yeah, so really, really cool tools I've got at my disposal here. And, you know, it's all...
Nice one.
Henry's in tune with me today, isn't he? He's proper, like, enjoying this, I think. Yeah, I'm glad you're liking it, Henry. And all of that stuff combines to make this sort of wonderful effect, doesn't it? It's all really good. Let's pop in there, and of course you'll notice that water does not get a look in at all in this stuff. Let's have a look at mesh edges. You know, it's not even picking up that because water's you know, mostly a post-process effect really, and that's much higher up in the stack of rendering than ReShade is able to kind of perceive. ReShade's blind to all that sort of stuff. It just sees the mesh objects that we've got, or decal objects that are on top of the water. You see, yeah, all that. So, you know, you can't see everything. And it's great to be able to see what we can actually, considering, you know, this kind of inability to see true wireframe or anything that the developers have exposed for our viewing. So, you know, thank God for ReShade. Brilliant, isn't it? Yeah. Right, I think I shall leave all that there. I'm just going to pop us into that, and we'll finish in this nice mode. It's lovely, isn't it? So this look at the mesh and stuff is something I'm intending on using in most videos going forward, actually, because this is a really useful thing for me when I'm wandering around. You know, any things like this I can sort of show you. We can bring up this view and have a good look. And I've tested it in various games, some Unreal games, working a treat. Tested it in Snowdrop Engine. Works pretty well. I find the fancier the engine, and there's a lot of fanciness in Snowdrop, you do get more artifacting, but you still get this basic information out of it like this. It's super useful, and it will often show you the LOD transitions, and especially with Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, you know, you can really get a good look at the sort of dynamic LODs that are happening, and you can see how it's changing on the fly as you get closer and further away. So yeah, really good. And so we will have a bit more mesh analysis, I reckon, going forward, because it's quite difficult for me to sort of talk about a lot of this stuff when I can't really show it to you as well as I would like. And now I can. So that's brilliant. So I think we'll leave it there. It's great. Actually, I'll find oh, here's Horsey. There we go. Might just leave it next to Horsey there. It's great for looking at characters and stuff, isn't it? Yeah, I'm really liking that. Yes, Bronca. He heard me, didn't he? All the characters are just, they're with me on this. Cool. So, thanks for joining me on this one. thanks all, thanks channel members, and I'll see you in many more videos to come. So take it easy and have a good day. Bye.